will be reviewed, and also Peter King. Some of them are having trouble getting in with the winds and traveling to get here. But we have many of our heroes and heroines and survivors here, and medical professionals and teachers and everyone that's been part of this effort. But we are waiting for them to arrive. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yeah. Jerry.
We're waiting for Jerry, we're waiting for Chuck.
Hey, thanks again. Hey, you.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you. How are you? How are you? I'm gonna wait for Senator Schumer, and I'm gonna wait for, yeah. Oh, but, aren't we waiting for Jerry? Do you want me to wait for Jerry? Or should start?
We've got like 18
Okay.
speakers.
Okay.
So get started.
We'll start on time. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Senator Gardner for standing with our heroes all across the country and for his deep commitment for passing this bipartisan bill. I want to thank Senator Schumer for his fearless leadership, Congresswoman Bologna, Congressman Nadler, Congressman King, for never wavering and fighting for our first responders and community members for a full decade. I also want to acknowledge Senator Murkowski, who's not here, but for her years of effort. And most of all, I want to thank our incredible advocates who are standing with us right now, who have traveled down here to Washington over and over and over again to be heard, to tell their story, and to demand that Congress do what's right. They shouldn't have to come to Washington. They shouldn't have to come here yet again after you've already come here over 100 times, week after week, month after month, year after year, to shame Congress into doing the right thing in 2010, in 2015, and now today. Firefighters, police officers, medical workers, construction workers, true heroes kept walking the halls of Congress every single day, demanding that Congress do the right thing. And what's most remarkable about the men and women standing here with me is that they didn't come here for themselves. They came here for their brothers and sisters, many who are too ill to come to make the trip once again. Those are the ones who answered the call of duty on that horrific day and the weeks and months thereafter. People like James Zadroga, who was one of the first responders to fall ill, and for whom this bill was originally named. People like Rae Pfeiffer, a firefighter, a true giant, who first started coming here walking unassisted, and then had to come with a cane, eventually in a wheelchair, until his body finally lost that fight to cancer. His last respects were in Arlington. It should not have to be a fight to pass this bill again. In this divisive time, in this broken Congress, if we cannot come together once again to stand with these brave heroes, if we cannot come together to show America once again that we will never, ever forget, we will not leave our 9/11 first responders on their own, then what can get done? So I want to say this very loud and clear to every senator, every member of this House. We must not force our 9/11 heroes to go through this same exhausting process again. We have to fully fund the September 11th Victims' Compensation Fund and make it permanent. And we must do it now. Here's why. The 9/11 death toll is still growing. 9/11 responders are still suffering. In the World Trade Center Health Program, 45,000 people are suffering from at least one 9/11 related chronic health condition. Over 10,000 have been certified with a 9/11 related cancer, with more being diagnosed every single day. And almost every day, another 9/11 responder or survivor dies from a 9/11 related cancer. We've known for years that the air that our first responders breathed in day after day, week after week, month after month, the air that community members breathed in was toxic. There was a high risk that this would make people sick later on. And now, just as the doctors have predicted, nearly 2 decades after the attack, which is the average time it takes for these types of cancers to develop, cancer rates in the 9/11 responder community are rising higher and faster than ever before. And that means that our 9/11 heroes are going to need the Victims' Compensation Fund program more urgently, in larger numbers than ever before. But just over a week ago, we all heard the horrible news that the VCF will indeed need to make severe cuts, between 50 and 70%. This will hurt real people, their families who are struggling, people who have already suffered through more than you can imagine. This will hurt thousands of 9/11 first responders, survivors, their families who have been waiting for years to get the help they need from this program. Congress must not let this happen. Congress must not sit idly by, ignoring this suffering, passing it off as someone else's problem, while drastic cuts are being made to the VCF program. This crisis is urgent. People are suffering. People are dying. And we cannot, and will not turn our backs on these men and women. Now, not now, and not ever. We must take the VCF permanent with full funding so that when our 9/11 heroes get that terrifying call from the doctor, that they'll at least have some peace of mind, that their families will not be lost. Anything less on our parts is shameful. Anything less sends a cruel message to our heroes and their families that Congress is shrugging its shoulders at their suffering and their loss. We must honor our 9/11 heroes, and that means giving them the support they need and deserve now. Otherwise, never forget is meaningless. So let's pass this bipartisan bill now. Our next speaker is Congressman Carolyn B. Bologna, who is leading the effort in the House.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your leadership in the Senate. And I thank all of you for joining us today, and a very special thank you to the men and women standing here with me who traveled from near and far to represent the 9/11 responders and survivors all over the country who rely on the Victims' Compensation Fund and deserve that they receive their full awards. First, I want to really emphasize that this is not a New York challenge. This is a challenge for the United States of America. This was an attack against America. These sufferers, the survivors, the heroes, the heroines, they are the veterans of the first attack of the war on terror on our soil, and they selflessly rushed to save the lives of others, and we need to be there for them now. I want to take a special time to recognize the father of Joe Zadroga. Please stand up. He's the father of James Zadroga. He's a chief, but his son was, he was a detective, lieutenant detective, and he was the first person diagnosed and died from health reasons associated with 9/11, and it happened in the great state of New Jersey. And I want to recognize so many important people here, not only my friends and colleagues in government. This is a bipartisan effort with Peter King leading the charge on the Republican side of the Senate. And I always say that the real twin towers of New York are our police and fire, and we have their leadership here today. And too many of the stories are similar to what Luis Alvarez has. Luis has had 23 treatments of 63 treatments of chemo. And we have lost over 200 police officers since 9/11. We lost roughly 300,000 on 9/11. We will soon surpass the number dying from health-related causes since 9/11. And we have with us representing the fire department, and his story is so sad, Bob Serra. It was his first day as a firefighter. He was going to work out. He saw the towers fall. He ran and got his gear, went into the towers, saved lives, worked on the pile. At first, he wasn't sick. This is a story of many. He had a nosebleed for 2 years, but then the different health challenges are here, and we have many, many teachers here. We now know that over 2,000 teachers are sick with cancers, over 25,000 students in our schools. Ellie Angler here representing teachers, and just so many, many areas that were affected by it. We've all been here many times before, and over the last 18 years, and we do not want to do this again. We need to get this authorized, introduced, and passed so that there is a permanent fund for those that are sick and need the help. Last week, the special master of the September 11 Victims Compensation Fund announced that the fund was running out of money and would have to cut compensation by 50 to 70% because of a budget shortfall. We cannot let this happen, and we will not stand for it. The 9/11 attacks caused one of the biggest health crises our country has ever faced. Tens of thousands of firefighters, police officers, federal and local enforcement officers, medical workers, construction workers, teachers, other heroes, many of them are here today. They selflessly rushed into Ground Zero to dig through the rubble, first for the survivors, and then for months, bravely searching for the remains of others. These men and women served with no other thought to their own health, and with a government that deliberately ignored the severe environmental health hazards that were at Ground Zero. The federal government told these workers that it was not a health hazard to work there. It was completely and totally false. So we have the duty to be there to provide them with the health care and the compensation they so justly deserve. And so after years of effort, we finally passed the 9/11 Health and Compensation Bill that funded the Zadroga Act, the health program, but we only got 5 years for the Compensation Act. So we are now back trying to make that Compensation Act permanent, and a big leader in this has been John Field and, of course, Jon Stewart and so many other people. I will say that this coat was given to me today by a former firefighter. He said it's a symbol of all the people that are working to make this happen, and I do not intend to take it off until we pass this bill. We have 85 co-sponsors in the House. We expect to have 150 by the end of the week. We are fortunate that the chairman of the Judiciary Committee for the United States Congress is the great Jerry Nadler, who is our next speaker, and I thank him profoundly. Oh, excuse me, Chuck, excuse me. I'm so used to working with Jerry's Chuck. We've got to get it through the House first, so we're already thinking strategy, right? You're right? Okay.
Hi. Well, thank you very much, Carolyn. I have always said that we owe two separate moral duties to the first responders and survivors, to all those who rushed in to save people in the buildings, to all those who worked on the pile for months. The first moral duty is because the United States was attacked. Al-Qaeda had nothing in particular against the World Trade Center or against downtown Manhattan. They had it in for the United States. And the people who have suffered for the United States, for all of us. And that gives us a moral duty to make them as whole as possible, and as Lincoln said, to care for him who shall have borne the battle. The second moral duty, and Carolyn alluded to it, was the fact that many, many of the people who are sick and dying or dead would not have gotten sick had it not been for the federal government and the mayor of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani, telling everybody the air was safe to breathe and they could work on the pile and don't worry about it. For the first 2 days, they said that with no knowledge. After the first 2 days, they said that knowing it wasn't true. We knew it wasn't true. Some of us were yelling at the time and saying, don't go back to work. Don't send your kids to Stuyvesant High School. Don't work on the pile. After the first 3 days, people took risks because there may be lives to save. After that, it was a cleanup operation, and no one should have risked their lives. But they were falsely assured by the federal government and by the mayor that there was no risk when we knew that wasn't true. So that's a second moral duty that we owe to all of the first responders, to all of those who are sick, to all those who are bearing the burden. And we must do what we can to satisfy that moral burden. It took Carolyn and me and others from 2003 to 2010 to get this bill, to get this Adroga bill through the House. It took Kirsten and Chuck another few months to get it through the Senate. But we had to compromise. In the Senate, they had a compromise. And the compromise was, it was a 5-year bill. A 5-year health program and a 5-year victims' compensation program. We knew perfectly well the problem wasn't going to be over in 5 years. So 5 years later, we had to do it again. And this time, we got the health program extended for 75 years, essentially permanently. But we couldn't get the Victims' Compensation Fund extended for more than 5 years, which we did. We got 5 years. We knew it wasn't enough. We knew we'd have to come back and do it again. Now, why we should have to do this over and over again is another question, but that's the political reality. What we didn't know was that the $7.5 billion that we appropriated for the Victims' Compensation Fund wouldn't last the 5 years. When we passed the bill, we didn't list cancer as one of the diseases because we couldn't prove it yet. We set up a committee that could add diseases, and they, of course, added cancer. Now, we have so many cancer cases, and more all the time, that it has used up the fund faster than we thought, and that's why the administrator is saying they're going to cut the benefits by 50% for those who apply before February 1st and 70% after, and that is morally untenable. A great nation cannot nickel and dime people who have sacrificed their health on our behalf. So that's why we are here today to announce the introduction of legislation, and we will have hearings on it in the committee soon, to do two things. One, to appropriate enough money, but two, to extend the health program, to extend the Victims' Compensation Program for 70 years to match the health program. Essentially to make both programs permanent, so we won't have to worry about it. John Field has said that for all the work he has done, and for all the times he has been here, and for all the people he has dragged here to go door to door, he doesn't want to have to do it again. And he shouldn't have to. And none of the people standing here should have to do it again. We should finally get the job done right, and we should get the job done now, and that's what we will do. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Senator Schumer, the minority leader, who has championed this bill from the very beginning and has never let go of this cause and has been an extraordinary voice for us, for all of us. Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank Senator Gillibrand and for the great job she has done on this, Congress members Maloney and Nadler and King, Senator Gardner, and all of those, most importantly, who we are fighting for, the people behind us and the people in front of us and the thousands and thousands and thousands of more that you represent. When this bill was put together, it was a moral obligation, not a 30% obligation, not a 50% obligation, not a 70% obligation, but 100% moral obligation. You rushed to the towers, We're going to help you with your health, with your economic situation, with your pain and suffering. You were an innocent bystander downtown. We're going to help you with your health, with your economic situation, with your pain and suffering. We weren't going to help you 30% of the way. We weren't going to help you 50% of the way. We weren't going to help you 70% of the way. We're going to help you all the way, because that's what a moral obligation is. We don't say to our soldiers who die in the battlefield, we'll cover 30% of your injuries or 40% of your pain and suffering. We cover it all. And the same should be true here. Same should be true here. This is not a money bill. This is a bill about what America is all about, what New York is all about, what our brave first responders and average citizens are all about. That when people are hurt because we're attacked, we come together. We come together. And if we learn that more people are hurt, we don't stop and say, too late, buddy. Too late, ma'am. You got your cancer 5 years too late. We step up to the plate. That's what America's always done. That's what America must do now. And the idea that we have had to scrounge for the years and beg people, well, give us a few years, should not be embedded in people's heads. This is a moral obligation. It is what America is all about. It is the same moral obligation we have had to our veterans and everybody else. I was there the day after 9/11. It was shocked. What?
You should get in the program.
Yeah. I won't tell you things, but okay. I was there. It was incredible, the bravery of people as well as the loss. I called on people to wear the flag that day, you may remember. I've worn this flag on my lapel every day since, in memory of those who were lost and as tribute to those who tried to save all the others, whether it's the firefighter who rushed to the towers or the guy in the shoe store who gave out all the shoes as people ran out of the towers barefoot. We shouldn't have to be here, that's all. We shouldn't have to be here. But we will be here today and tomorrow and the next day and the day after until we fully fund the Victims' Compensation Fund, until we fully fund all of the funds that people need, and until we don't have to come back again, because all of these are made permanent and the solemn obligation of the United States to its citizens is permanently ratified. Oh, and I just want to mention one other person who so inspired me is Rae Pfeiffer, who is here every day, every week, every month. Rae is gone from us, but he's looking down now, and he is urging every one of us on to not give up as he never gave up until we succeed. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Our next speaker is Cory Gardner, who is leading the charge for the Republicans in the Senate, and we are very grateful for your leadership, Cory.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, Congressman Maloney, Senator Schumer, my colleagues in the House. Thank you for your leadership. I'm here because this is not just a New York event. This is not just a East Coast event. This is an American event. This is a Sea to Shining Sea moment, a Sea to Shining Sea promise, a Sea to Shining Sea obligation. The diaspora of first responders has spread far beyond the World Trade Center and Ground Zero. It's in every state in our country. And to the over 100 Coloradans who were there that day, going into the buildings, seeking those who needed aid, we were all here for them. I was 26 years old when the Trade Center was hit, September 11th attack. I'd never had the opportunity to travel to New York to see the World Trade Centers as they were standing. I never saw them. My first time to New York City, I'll never forget, was in mid-October after the towers had been hit. I'll never forget going to Ground Zero and for what was a few minutes filling my lungs with the same air for a few minutes that is a lifetime for the men and women here. And those who have suffered as the U.S. was suffering, and those who we will not allow to go through this alone. We shouldn't turn these courageous individuals into people who just shake the couch for change. This is about funding the Victims' Compensation Fund, not for a moment, but for a lifetime. This is about extending it to match what we have done in so many other areas, to recognize the bravery of the men and women here today and across our country. We will have Republican support. We will have Democrat support. Why? Because we have the American people's support. Thanks to all of you.
Our next speaker is Congressman Peter King, who has been there from the beginning, leading the charge of the House of Representatives and making sure this is a bipartisan bill. Congressman King.
Kirsten, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, Senator Gardner, Congressman Nadler, Congressman Maloney. This is truly a bipartisan effort. It's an American effort. This is not a budget issue. It's not a highway issue or a transportation issue or a spending issue. It's a human issue. It's an obligation that we owe to all of those, either those who are first responders, those who lived in the area, those who were students, those who just happen to be local merchants who got caught up in this. This is a horrible day in American history, and we have a moral obligation, as Jerry and Carolyn have said, a moral obligation to follow through on this. This should not even be an issue. This should be something we just do. But I remember going back to 2001, we had to demonstrate outside the Special Master's office to get the money released at that time. So it's been going on for 17 years. And we've had successes along the way. They've been delayed success, but we should have, not us, we have no problem going through it. Those who are suffering should not have to go through it. Their families should not have to go through it. I see Mr. Zadroga here. How many times does he have to come back? His son paid the price. Mr. Zadroga has been the lead on this. And again, we have this obligation. I mean, I see it in my district every day, every week. I run into somebody else who's coming down with a 9/11 illness. This is real. I had over 150 people killed in my district. Many, many hundreds more are sick. So this is real. It's not a decimal point. It's not a comma or a semicolon. It's not a page in some legislative record. These are real human beings and their families who are suffering. So we have the obligation, and certainly if there's anyone who was able to break this loose was Jon Stewart. The way he brought it out of the political realm, out of the political debate, showed what nonsense so many of the arguments were against it, and really shamed people into getting the job done. We hope John doesn't come on as strong now as he did in the past, but all of us are committed to it, and John, you're on your own once this gets going. You can do whatever you have to get this job done, as you did so well in the past. But seriously, when I see the cops, the firefighters, the construction workers, all those who put their lives on the line for us, they are suffering today. They continue to suffer, and their families are suffering. So let's get it done. I pledge to do, again, working in a bipartisan way. Carolyn and Jerry in the House have been great. They have a partisan tone to it, and I hope we can get more Republicans on this to make this work and get it through. So, again, God bless America, and mostly, God bless those brave men and women that put their lives on the line for us. Yeah. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jon Stewart, who has used his voice in an extraordinary way on behalf of our first responders and community members. Jon Stewart.
Thank you very much. We only have 150 more speakers, so I guess what I'll ask is, this is all very nice, and I don't really know who we're talking to, but I know we have a lot of media coverage today, and I know that tomorrow the 24-hour cycle will move on, and you'll be discussing the body language of Kim Jong-un and, whatever else is going on there, and phones will be ringing, and all kinds of crap will be going on. So what I would like to ask for you is this. I didn't want to ask you, I just want to beg you, when we're done here, anybody who is with a media outlet, anybody here who is a writer or has a platform, stop and don't talk to us. Talk to the men and women who are sick and suffering right now. Talk to Joe. Let him tell about James and what he went through and all the things that these guys have had to fight for. Talk to everybody that's sitting here so that you understand that these are human beings. This isn't just rhetoric. But you can amplify their stories. You can get their stories out to the American people because, trust me, if the American people in their busy lives had any sense that these shenanigans were going on, they would be outraged. But we need your advocacy as well. We need you to use your mouthpiece to get this going. Because we can cut through the nonsense here, everybody. This is about 12 Republicans on the Senate side. That's all this is. You get 12 Republicans on the Senate side, and this thing goes through. This bill, this program already exists. It's like you have a Starbucks card. We're just asking to get a little more money on it. It already exists. It already is there. It's already shown itself to be effective. It's already relieved some of the stresses that these grieving families are going through. There's no fraud. There's no nonsense. And every year we've been here, every time when John Field has to gather guys and, man, interview them now because we brought friends down here before and they're not here anymore. So get their stories out now so that the people can understand what the true cost of this is to these families. And all we ever hear is, what's your pay go? And I understand, visiting Washington, I understand what a town of fiscal responsibility this is. As I stood in the marble rotunda laced with gold, I thought to myself, we have to be very careful not to waste money on first responders with cancer. This is nonsense. You guys know it. I know it. This is theater. We're all down here today. There's no reason to have dragged these people down here. There's no reason to have these conversations. It's bullshit. You know it, and I know it. So let's stop the nonsense. And by the way, you know the tenacity of the people in front of you. They're not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. And ultimately, we're going to get to a point where the light shines and shame is brought. And then this will happen. So how about we make a deal? This is your opportunity to write a final chapter for these men and women who fought for 18 years. They fought when nobody believed they were sick. They fought when nobody believed that their sickness was caused by 9/11. They fought when nobody thought their health care was worth paying for. They fought every step of the way. And it is an embarrassment to us and our country. And I'm going to say this now. I hope, are the cameras on? Is everybody on me? The Trump Justice Department is doing an excellent job administrating this program. The claims are going through faster, and the awards are coming through. The Trump Justice Department, I don't know about anything else. I'm not going to comment on anything else. But that's why we're in the problem that we're in, is the program works exactly like it's supposed to. So now it's Congress's job to fund it properly and let these people live in peace. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jon Field. Our next speaker is Jon Field, who has walked these corridors, busloads of first responders and community members. He's never given up. He's fearless.
You know, Jon Stewart's going to leave today. He'll be back. The cameras are going to leave today, but you'll be back. Members will go off and do other issues. Some will go on campaign trails. No pun intended. But we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be doing 37 sit-down meetings. We've been here 6 times. Today's number 7 since October. We have over 200 meetings under our belt. We're not going anywhere. After 1,400 plus meetings in 15 years, we have more tenure and more time than most freshman congressmen on the Hill. We will never be disrespected again, ever. You're either with us or you're against us. If you're morally bankrupt, we'll expose you. If you practice political malpractice, we will expose you. If you're politically illiterate, we will expose you. I'm in the mood for a fight. And we're going to get a bill done this year. And the New York delegation, while you guys all think I'm loyal to you, I love you all dearly, I am loyal to the 9/11 community. I am loyal to my friends that continue to die. I am loyal to those affected by 9/11. I've just been honored and humbled to work with you guys. But don't ever question my loyalty and where it lies. I love Jon Stewart, he's my friend. But I love Kenny Spector, Rich Palmer, and Michael Connell more. Those guys are sick, those guys are dying. So we're going to challenge every member and every member of Congress and the Senate. We're going to challenge their empathy. We're going to challenge their humanity. And if you're not on board with that, then you're going to get knocked out.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mario Salento, our president of the New York State AFL-CIO, who is now championing this cause on behalf of our union members.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. On behalf of the 2.5 million members of the AFL-CIO in New York, I want to thank all of our political leaders who are here today for your leadership, your dedication, and your commitment. And certainly want to acknowledge all of our brothers and sisters who are here today. You know, we all know the old saying, you know, if for those who don't know their history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, we know the history. We've gone over it here time and time again. 9 years to get the Zadroga Act passed, come back again 5 years later, be back here again today, and each and every time bringing our heroes and our first responders here with us. And I just have to say respectfully, enough is enough. It's cruel. It's cruel to our heroes and our first responders. It's cruel to their families. Their health situation is not temporary, unfortunately. Our responsibility to our heroes and our first responders is not temporary. Therefore, the VCF cannot be temporary. It has to be made permanent. And I think part of the problem here sometimes is this. We look at this from 30,000 feet in the air, and I think John mentioned it a few minutes ago. This is not a dollars and cents issue. We have to personalize this more. I have 3 daughters. My girls are 15, 13, and 8 years old. My wife and I, we're blessed. And as parents, you think about, well, what if we're not here someday? Or what if we can't do the things that we're doing now? How do we take care of them? Who takes care of them? Who pays the rent? Who pays the mortgage? Who feeds and clothes our children if something happens to us? Well, this is a practical issue for those brave men and women who are here today, who are thinking at it, not conceptually, but practically now. And we have to be better than that. We have to be better as a country and as a society and just as human beings toward each other. That's what this is really about. So I say this, if we want to consider ourselves an enlightened society, then we should be judged by how we treat those who need our help the most and who deserve our help the most. And we know that these brave men and women need and deserve our help by virtue of the fact that they are in this predicament because they gave of themselves to others. So I ask on behalf of the entire organized labor movement, I ask you, regardless, for all elected officials, regardless of what state you come from or what party you are from or your ideology, join us and take our brave men and women with us forward, not leaving them behind on the battlefield, but taking them forward to give them the opportunity for a better life. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Edward A. Kelly, IAFF General Secretary, Treasurer.
Thank you very much, Senator. And thank you very much to the members of Congress. Johnny Stewart lending his voice. Johnny Field for fighting, for standing on the side of righteousness. It's my honor to represent over 300,000 firefighters and paramedics throughout the United States and Canada, tens of thousands of which worked on the pile down at Ground Zero. We knew what the risk was. We weren't blinded to the fact that you'd spit out dust at the end of a day, that there was a good possibility that this would catch up with you at some point. I know because I was one of them. I worked on the pile at Ground Zero. But what flowed through the people on that pile, not just the firefighters who lent their skills, or the police officers, or the military members, or, as the senator mentioned, the shoemaker that handed out shoes, or the people that drove the trains that evacuated so many people, or the ferries. We were all woven in the fabric of doing the right thing, of standing up for righteousness, of being Americans. We were all Americans on that pile. And I ask you at home listening, think about how you felt on September 12th. Think about what it meant to see an American flag flying, to hold an American flag in your hand, to look at your children and know that you're going to teach them what it means to be an American. Because if we're not sticking together, as Franklin, nope, go all the way back. Benjamin Franklin said, if we don't hang together, we will hang separately. And as Americans, it's time to hang together. We need you to find how you felt on September 12th. We need you to call your congressman, your 2 U.S. senators. We need you to stand up for American values, to stand up and fight, to do what's right by those who on that fateful day and the days that followed chose to put their health, to put their safety lower down on the priority list than it was to be an American. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jake LaMonda, President, Uniform Fire Officers Association, Local 854, IAFF, AFL-CIO.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for supporting this bill. I had prepared some words today, but I always feel as though when you have something important to say, it's better to speak from the heart than off a piece of paper. I represent over 7,800 active and retired New York City fire officers. On that day, 18 years ago, make no mistake about it, we were attacked. We were attacked on our home soil. On that day, the New York City Fire Department had a total recall. Over 10,000 members responded for duty. We toiled day in and day out. First, it was a rescue mission. Then, sadly, it became a recovery mission. But every single day, we were breathing in toxins and those carcinogens. And one of the proudest moments is to represent these people here, because I know when I have to talk to them and they're sick and dying, not one of them turned their back on this nation, and not one of them ever regretted going down there and doing what we had to do. America was not knocked to their knees. People from every state in our country responded, over 90,000. And we raised this nation back up off its knees. I want to thank all the elected officials here for standing tall. I'm going to ask Congress to stand tall like those towers once stood and pass this once and for all. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Leroy Mcginnis, Vice President of Uniform Firefighters Association, Local 94, IAFF, AFL-CIO.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator. It's a privilege and honor to be here representing over 20,000 active and retired New York City firefighters. As Jake LaMonda just previously said, on that fateful day, over 10,000 of our members responded. We came because we needed to be there. Our brothers and sisters were in that building making rescue attempts. And then when the buildings came down, we were looking for them. And then we stayed days, weeks, and months after. We're down here too because it's about numbers. It's almost 18 years since that fateful day. The $7 billion fund is depleting. But there are other numbers. We have over 2,000 New York City firefighters that have at least one diagnosed cancer. Many have multiple ones. We have over 6,500 members that have some form of 9/11 related ailment. We've buried nearly 200 firefighters since that fateful day. It's great to have the representative of Colorado here, Senator Gardner. For those who don't know, in Colorado Springs, the IAFF has a memorial, and all the names of firefighters around the country that die in the line of duty are inscribed there every year. We are putting 25 names on the wall this year, those members we lost last year. And each year that number continues to grow. So we're here looking for support. We have the support of the great New York delegation. We appreciate what they've been doing for us for all these years. They work on our behalf, and they've gotten the job done up till now. And we need to get the rest of the country involved doing this job and protecting the future. I want to point out, I have Robert Talascio Jr. here and Bridget Gormley here. Both their fathers. Both of their fathers only recently died in the last 18 months from 9/11 related ailments. Unfortunately, they both suffered for an extended period of time. Ask them what this means to their families. As I said before, we've almost 200 firefighters since that day. That's how many kids, how many widows, how many spouses without a partner. Those are real numbers. Those are the numbers that we have to look at. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Pat Lynch, President of the Police Benevolent Association, who's been fighting tirelessly on this.
Thank you, Senator. You know, on September 11, 2001, when the call came in and we had what we call a rapid mobilization or a level 4, every on-duty and off-duty New York City police officer responded to ground zero without asking one question. Our retired members, because once a cop, always a cop, responded without asking one question. We went there and we worked on our hands and knees the best we can to bring every one of, not just our members, not just firefighters, but your family members back. And then when we seen that people weren't breathing in that rubble, we tried to bring the remains of your loved ones home, and we didn't leave. Whether it's a rescue or a recovery, we stayed. I remember a number of years ago when we took that train ride down here to Washington, D.C., and folks were calling this a handout, and what's the pay for, and the language that gets spoken down here in Washington. I remember saying, look, this is not a handout. We're not looking for anything but the treatment and monitoring so that we can get better, we can breathe, and we can go home. But the reality is, some of us didn't get to go home. The reality is, some that were in this crowd back then are no longer here. The reality is, some folks in this crowd here, sitting here today, have lost loved ones, and some are sick. And that's the reality. It's an honor to be here with Mr. Zadroga, because you were the first, my brother. It's an honor to stand here with Detective Alvarez while we're standing here saying, man, we've been standing here a long time, don't lock your knees. My feet are tired. After all his treatment, he's standing here. He won't even take a chair, but he's standing here. That's the face of New York City police officers. There's so many names here, but Jon Stewart, he lent his voice, he lent his face, he lent his fame to press conferences like this. But the last time we were together, we were up in the Bronx, in Calvary Hospital, next to a bed of Manny Vargas, who was sick from September 11th illness. Well, 3 days later, he passed away, and he was at the funeral, too. This is not a game. It's not about being on TV. It's not about making speeches. It's about getting the job done. And we have to get the job done, because there's a moral pact. Police officers and firefighters respond. We have an obligation to take care of them. A moral obligation, that's still real, because there's always a possibility of tomorrow we do it again. We don't want our women and men to hesitate. So remember those that went before us, remember those that are doing the job today, and remember those that may do it on into the future. God bless each and every one of you.
Our next speaker is Santos Rodriguez, Director of Community Affairs and Strategic Initiatives for New York City Building Trades Council.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. You know, when I walk into my office, we have a conference room every day as a daily reminder of September 11th. We hang around our conference room 61 hard hats. 61 members of the building trades we lost that day. 61 family members are affected. Countless more are being affected today because alongside our first responders, NYPD, FDNY, EMS, and everyone else, were the New York City building trades men and women that ran down. I worked at 5 Times Square that day. Days after, we filled buses. Like Pat Lynch said, not one of us asked the question. We went down there, operating engineers, iron workers, people with real skills, people that had the experience to move the debris just in case there was a survivor to make sure that we can get to people. It is a shame that we're here today. This shouldn't have to be. We asked that this gets passed today. We called out all Congress to do the right thing and extend and fully fund the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. Anything less is unacceptable. I thank the men and women standing up here that served and went down there alongside of all that couldn't be here and all that passed. May they rest in peace. And let's not forget them. Let's not forget that they're living also. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Lila Nordstrom, who was a 17-year-old student at Stuyvesant High School on 9/11, just 3 blocks from the World Trade Center. Lila began suffering from serious respiratory issues and was later diagnosed with GERD.
Hi, my name is Lila. I was a student at Stuyvesant High School on 9/11. Stuyvesant is only a few blocks from the World Trade Center. We were there on 9/11. We evacuated with the rest of Lower Manhattan, but we also returned less than a month later to a contaminated school building that was filled with smoke next to a barge where all of the debris from the World Trade Center site was being carted past our school and dumped next to our air intake system. We went through multiple police checkpoints to get into our school building. We were given cryptic warnings not to drink out of the water fountains and not to go out to lunch. But somehow that same air that wasn't safe for us to eat lunch in was deemed fine for us to walk to and from school in. We were not down there alone. There were 19,000 students in Lower Manhattan that were exposed to the same cleanup. And that's not to mention the teachers, the school staff, the area residents, and area workers who were all breathing in the same toxic dust. And we all know how that story ends, because we know that we later found out that even though we were told that it was safe to be down there, including safe for children, that we had been lied to, that it turned out that it was not safe at all, and that we had been put in a dangerous situation when we were not even old enough to advocate for ourselves. And for us, that's not just a talking point, because that choice has made us sick. It's created an actual crisis for us. I suffer from 9/11 related health conditions, but I'm certainly not alone amongst my classmates. And as the years have gone by, the conditions that we have heard about have gotten more and more serious. We used to hear mostly about chronic but manageable health conditions that, could be treated with with affordable medications. We now regularly hear about students that are coming down with cancers and other serious illnesses. And this is especially disappointing because we're facing longer latency periods. We were very young when we were exposed, and so we're just starting to see our illness rates spike now, just as the VCF is about to close its doors to us. That means that classmates of mine are gonna find out that they are sick years from now, and they are not gonna be able to access help. That means that classmates of mine who are already sick but live dispersed all over the nation, as I do, I live in California now, there are not local resources to help me find out about these programs there. There is not local media coverage of these resources there. There are not local advocates working to make sure that 9/11 survivors in my community in California know about what resources are available to them. That means that people that are currently sick are still not going to have found out about these resources in time to actually file claims with the VCF. We're going to continue to have our lives affected by our 9/11 exposures. We're going to have our working lives shortened. We're going to have our families and our quality of life and our futures affected by these exposures. And if this program is slowly drained and then allowed to expire, it's going to be just another example of a time that we were forgotten by a government that thought it was more important that Lower Manhattan return to normal than it was to take care of the children that had experienced a major tragedy down there. This program is here to protect us. Our suffering is not going to end on a deadline. It's not going to slowly diminish by 50 to 70%. And so neither should this program. Thanks so much.
Our next speaker is Terrence Opiola. Terrence Opiola was a customs agent with the United States Customs Service at 9/11 and was assigned to the New York City office. He spent hundreds of hours at Ground Zero and the Fresh Kills landfill. He has subsequently been diagnosed with leukemia and a host of digestive conditions attributed to the exposure of the toxic debris at the former World Trade Center.
Thank you, and good afternoon. My name is Terrence Opiola, and I'm a sick first responder. As the senator said, I have 8 certified chronic illnesses, including chronic leukemia. During 9/11, I was employed. 6 World Trade Center was the U.S. Customs House. I was employed as a special agent with Customs conducting criminal investigations. After 9/11, I spent numerous hours both at Ground Zero and at the Fresh Kills landfill. This past, actually, it's a year now, but the fall of 2017, I was forced to resign my position with the federal government. Almost 30 years as a criminal investigator, I had finally reached the pinnacle of federal law enforcement. I was a senior executive service member with Homeland Security Investigations. I was the special agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations New Jersey field office, a job that I loved, but I couldn't do it anymore. I put it off, and finally talking to the doctors from the World Trade Center Health Program, I must give a shout out to them at Mount Sinai, Doctors Crane and Crowley. Thank you so much for everything you do for us. After consulting with them and my attorney and advisors, I finally pulled the plug and had to retire. The one thing that really pushed me over the edge and said it's going to be okay was everyone telling me that the VCF would be there for me. So right now, I'm one of the individuals that's in between. I don't know if I'm going to get 50%. I don't know if I'm going to get 30%. So the last couple of years has been difficult for me and my family. But I wake up every morning and I thank God, because I'm the lucky one. And any of the responders up here with me, my brothers and sisters, are the lucky ones. What I like to talk to you about are those families that I know specifically that are not as lucky because their loved ones have passed. Their loved ones have passed, and they are waiting for VCF payments. They cannot survive on what they're bringing home now. Their fathers, their mothers were heroes, and they are struggling to get by. They live in the New York metropolitan area. They live down here in DC. There are HSI special agents that I know that are living on $1,000 a month, a family of 4, depending on that VCF money to come in. And make no mistake about it, I think everybody up here has said that it works. Okay? And I'm not pointing fingers. I haven't heard any of my guys or colleagues point fingers at anybody. If you want to point fingers, it's the terrorists that did it. Okay? It's not an administration. It's not Joe. It's not a politician. It's the bad guys that did this. And that latency period, and we haven't reached some of the dates yet. So I beg you guys, again, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm alive. But think about those agents from HSI, the firefighters, the police, construction workers, where their families are now waiting for their VCF money. And that 50 or 30% is not going to cut it. Just to close, I just want to thank a couple guys. I would not be here and without the leadership of these three individuals. John Field, of course, from the Feel Good Foundation. Ben Shavat from 9/11 Health Watch. And then Matt McCauley, who is a first responder. He's an attorney now, but he is a true warrior for us. So I just want to say to you guys, let's get it done. Right? Whatever you need, we're going to get you. Okay? All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Karen Gaines. She's the widow of Scott Gaines, who was an NYPD first responder on 9/11. He died after a 20-month battle on September 27th, 2017, of end-stage metastatic cancer of the tonsils. While the family did receive a personal injury award to Mr. Gaines, it was awarded after he had died. Mrs. Gaines and her daughter now have a pending VCF death claim that will be subject to the 50% reduction.
Thank you, Senator. It's been a long journey. I stand in front of you as a widow and part of a growing community that I never thought would exist. At 9/11, my husband didn't hesitate. In fact, I had only worked 15 minutes away from our home. It was supposed to be a day off from him, and he had already left to go in. And we made the decision as a couple that he was going to continue to do this because it was a fight of national importance. And we dealt with the long tours, became a little bit of a single parent. My daughter didn't see too much of him. And the trauma even afterwards, after he had retired. And then we got a diagnosis of cancer. And again, we, as a couple, we're going to fight because we're bigger than this. Unfortunately, we lost that battle. And my husband died waiting for the VCF and believing that this country was going to stand here and protect his family when he couldn't. So I only stand as one person, but representing a much larger community that desperately needs Congress's help to please fully fund the VCF. Thank you.
Any questions on topic only today, please? Any questions?
Thank you, Senator. One of the biggest impediments in the past to passing victims' comp in issues like this has been the fact that when it comes down to consideration, it gets lobbed in with all these other bills, omnibus, transportation, import-export tax. What assurances can you make as lawmakers to the men and women who are here, Mr. Field, Mr. Zadroga, and all these brave people, that this would be considered cleanly, it could pass cleanly, and not be lumped in with these other messy bills that give lawmakers what they think is a right to say no?
I think it should be an up or down vote, as we've done in the past. This bill has passed unanimously every time we voted on it. It should be up or down in the House and the Senate. And if Congress could just come together, you could do it on consent.
As the minority leader in the Senate, we've been able to get up or down votes before. We will get one now. Everyone in the Senate should stand on notice. They're going to have to say yes or no.
Is this something you've discussed with Mr. McConnell as well?
Not yet, but I will.
Let me just say, as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House, we will take up this bill independently, and I'm sure the House will pass it independently.
I could say I had discussed it with Mr. McConnell last time.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that he is an impediment to getting this done. So I would suggest bringing all measure of pressure, because he tried to make it so that they added some oil export. He used these men and women